So I will start from legal framework of the GHG inventory in Ukraine, then continue with institutional arrangements, and I framed main lessons learned from the preparation of the national inventory report. And these lessons learned is basically what I concluded from almost 10 years of experience in preparing GHG inventory in Ukraine on my position. So starting from legal framework in Ukraine, of course, the base of any actions in Ukraine are the laws of Ukraine on adoption of the UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol, and also Paris Agreement. In 2005, the President of Ukraine authorized the government to establish necessary legal institutional arrangements for matters to fulfill the commitments under the UNFCCC and KP. And in the same order, the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine was authorized to coordinate all matters aimed on fulfillment of UNFCCC and KP. So basically, the ministry is in charge of any actions and response and commitments under the climate change international agreements. So the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine established the national inventory system in its resolution in 2006. That one is rather general resolution which establishes the procedure of data gathering and also preparation of the national inventory report and the responsibility of the ministry to submit that report in timely manner to the UNFCCC. That resolution, unfortunately, does not contain any concrete procedures or much more concrete actions needed by other ministries and agencies, other than just to provide data for the ministry to prepare this national inventory report. And I will come back to that weakness later. Several other documents were adopted as well by the government of Ukraine. Most of them are aimed in fulfillment of the provisions of the KP, and those are related mostly to the joint implementation of the joint implementation mechanism, but not related to the GHG inventory directly. So basically, those are legal basis for GHG inventory currently. Going further to institutional arrangements, so the Ministry of Environmental Protection, as I mentioned, is responsible for the commitments of international agreements on climate change, and the ministry is also, of course, responsible for the functioning of the national inventory system. So in 2011, so you see since adoption in 2006, 5 years, the national inventory report was prepared on the project basis. But in 2011, the government of Ukraine accepted the proposition of the ministry to establish the National Center for GHG Emission Inventory in its resolution. So in Ukraine, the government decided to establish a permanent institution which is responsible for preparation of the GHG inventory. The institution was established under the supervision of the ministry. At that time, it was an agency, and the main functions of the institution in the GHG inventory are: so first of all, select the methodologies, methods, and other relevant factors necessary for the GHG inventory preparation, considering any guidances from the COP, CMP, CMA, of course, and IPCC. Since the institution is experts in institutions employed are aware about all the guidances that should be followed to prepare GHG inventory, so they are mostly responsible to select and make decisions on what methodologies are best fitted in the Ukrainian circumstances, but also in the guidances. Second is the institution is authorized to collect necessary data for the GHG inventory based on those methodologies. Third, perform the calculations, including the any QA/QC procedures, and all the QC procedures are done by the expert themselves, and of course the quality assurance procedures are done by the experts or authorities which are not involved directly in the GHG inventory. Then, based on those calculations, develop relevant sections of the national inventory report. And since most of the information in the national inventory report is on the GHG emissions and removal, so like around 80% of the report is developed by the institution. And the rest of the information is some supplementary information based on the commitments of the Kyoto Protocol. And of course, facilitate the review process by the UNFCCC Secretariat. And the UNF every year, and or recently it is once per 2 years, the UNFCCC Secretariat organizes the review process by the experts, and the center is closely cooperating with the ministry to answer any concerns and questions raised by the UNFCCC Secretariat and the experts. But of course, the institution and the experts provide other support to the ministry, specifically to GHG emissions and removals when the consultations are needed to make political decisions or legislation or plans. But also our other department is supporting the ministry in other fields of let's say GHG inventory, which is related to establishment of emission trading system, but monitoring, reporting, and verification system as a predecessor or as a basis before establishing the emission trading system. So we have two departments in the institution, which one of which is doing GHG inventory, and the other one is supporting the ministry on MRV. A brief graph on the institutional arrangement. So, as I mentioned, Ministry of Environmental Protection is a major key player or has a main role in the climate change commitments fulfillment in Ukraine, on which considering the GHG inventory with the ministry is responsible for planning of the inventory, organization of NIR preparation, which is related to any let's say bureaucratic steps needed. Activity data collection, I will come back to that a bit later. Storing data, organization of any scientific researches, and that is related also for the improvement of GHG inventory, of course. Also, organization of quality assurance procedures when the coordination with any other institutions or agencies are needed. And of course, the submission and communication with the Secretariat. The center itself is a executor of preparation of inventory reports, specifically advertising the ministry what data is needed, and based on that data to perform calculations, follow quality control procedures, any other steps or data clarifications, etc. In its activities, the National Center, of course, may communicate with other institutions and external experts, and those communication is really valuable, since experts themselves enhance their knowledge and also capacity uh, when something is unknown, and when the some external, let's say, um, opinion is needed. And also there is a committee on UNFCCC implementation, which is interagency. All the representatives of all the ministries and agencies which are involved in climate change, let's say, activities that include GHG inventory, any mitigation actions, adaptation actions, planning process, etc. But also it includes scientific, let's say, branch, that is National Academy of Science. Also, it includes some non-governmental organizations, and that committee is really helping in spreading the knowledge and sharing the issues with climate change related issues in Ukraine, for example, when any data is needed, when there are some issues related to mitigation, when the data is not existing in Ukraine, when it's not gathering, then it is possible to share this information on interagency committee. So it helps to understand each other. Okay, so I will go to lessons learned, and maybe there will be a few minutes left to answer your questions. So these are lessons that let's say wrote, as I think those are the most important ones. But of course, I can answer any questions. So first of all, the legal basis on the decree of government of Ukraine sometimes is not sufficient to resolve issues with data collection when the limitations related to laws of Ukraine. And the first example is the example with the State Statistics Service, which is regulated by the law on the state statistic, and there were some clashes with that law when we needed some information which was confidential, and the law was not allowing the state statistic to share it with anyone, including the state agencies and ministries. So based on that, of course, it is better to establish the national inventory system on the highest level of legislation, and in Ukraine those are laws. So the plans in current time is to adopt a law on the data collection and sharing for the purpose of GHG inventory and overall fulfilling the commitments on climate change. Second is automatic application of decisions of COP, CMP, CMA in the GHG inventory avoids lengthy process of the national legislation adoption process. However, some issues need to have national legislation in place. As I mentioned, the decree of government includes rather general provisions. There are much more specific provisions in relevant decisions of COP, CMP, and if in the future it will be in the CMA decisions for the GHG inventory, and also for the other mechanisms of the Paris Agreement. And sometimes those provisions should be adopted in the national legislation, since basically the practice says that only Ministry of Environment understand what should be done in order to fulfill those commitments, and other ministries may have different opinions on what is necessary and what is not. So basically, in order to have common understanding and common understanding of importance of actions, so it is better to have some national legislation adopted on some important provisions of decisions. Next one is close cooperation between the center and the ministry greatly facilitates the communication with different agencies, ministries, and enterprises in the process of data collection. So I promised to come back to data collection earlier, since from one side I said that the center is responsible for data collection, but also the ministry as well. So that was a practical reason, since when the center started to collect data, the response rate from ministries and enterprises especially was not that that was expected, and the next it was like 2 or 3 years. It was efforts to collect data by the center itself, but then it was switched to the ministry, and that one showed much better results. Maybe since the requests for the data are not sent by some institution, but by the ministry, and by just only that factor, maybe enterprises feel that it's much more important and responsible to respond to that letters. So at this point, the center prepares, let's say, prepares some information which should be gathered, and the ministry sends the letters and then collects the answers and then transfers to the center. Next one, the establishment of the center created necessary institutional memory of data and supporting materials of GHG inventories in cases of reforms in the structure of governmental agencies and ministries. Since 2012, when the center was established, there were several times when the government structure was reformed, and in different time the center was under the agency, then under one ministry, then under another ministry. Nevertheless, the center was still as a unit, and was still holding all the information and the memory. So despite these changes in the structure of government, it was still possible to prepare GHG inventory to fulfill the commitments to report and to undergo the review by the UNFCCC Secretariat. Involvement of other specialized research institutions facilitates to comprehensively consider national circumstances in the GHG inventory. As I said, we communicate with different research institutes and external experts to better understand any possible issues or inconsistencies of data, or inconsistencies of calculation methods, etc., etc. And the more you communicate with different entities, the more you can consider all the circumstances. But also, this communication is also applied to different ministries and agencies which are providing the data, since just only official lettering is not sufficient sometimes to understand the reasoning behind, or even data availability at all. So on the practice, our experts established some personal connections to representatives of different entities and ministries, and when sometimes something is unknown, then it's much easier and productive to just call and to talk to specific experts from different ministry, for example, and understand what has happened in some particular case. Next one, the workers of the center are not public servants, so they do not have limitations related to public servants legislation, and especially that is considering the anti-corruption laws, since for public servants that law is much more strict than for just workers of the state or budget institutions. And the seventh lesson is much connected to the previous one. Technical experts employed in the center have an opportunity to enhance its expertise by enrollment in other projects related to climate change or working in other institutions, educational or scientific. So basically, previously, the work to prepare GHG inventory in Ukraine had a clear, let's say, cycles or periods of time when they have higher workload or a bit less workload. So on the periods when there is less work, so experts may be doing some external work, and that is very valuable from 2 points. First of all, for the experts themselves, they are greatly enhancing their personal knowledge, personal experience, and second of all, of course, it is some external possibility to have to earn money. So our one of our experts is actually partly employed in research institute, and some experts were enrolled in short-term and mid-term projects which are not related to GHG inventory directly. And one of interested one is, as you know, the UNFCCC Secretariat is doing the review process, and to be able to participate in that review process, experts should undergo the training courses and pass the exams to become such an expert that can do these reviews and analysis. So when people are employed in the center and doing the GHG inventory, they can also participate in the training courses and may be enrolled in this review process as an external expert. And even it is something that on the personal capacity of experts, it is greatly enhances the process of GHG inventory in Ukraine as well, since even experts, we believe in our experts that their expertise is best suited for GHG inventory preparation. Nevertheless, it's sometimes the experts themselves have shortage of knowledge on some specific areas or categories, and by doing these reviews, they have an opportunity to first of all refresh all the knowledge that they already know, but second of all, of course, it is a connection and also communication with other experts from other countries as the same reviewers, and in that communication they can also figure out any possible issues, questions that they have in their mind, which is not directly related to the review process.